This video is going to be about how to do a dehumidifier check. So dehumidifier is something that we check 6 times a day. We check it same time we check the plant room, and we're just going to talk about what we're looking for and why. So the whole reason that we care about the dehumidifier is not just because if you ignore the dehumidifier and it's not working, the glass will fog up and you can't see anything. It's because the amount of humidity in the air affects the quality of the ice. So if we control the humidity properly and we keep it within the right range, then we can have better quality ice. And that's what it really all comes down to. If the place is really dry and the air is really dry, it's not good for the ice. If the area is super moist and really humid, it's not good for the ice. So we want to keep it at a certain level, and that's the whole reason that we have the dehumidifier, and it's the reason that we check the dehumidifier, and it's the reason that we pay attention to this. So if we look up here, we can see right now the damper going into Thelma Crow is wide open, and the damper going into Alex Cleta is completely closed. And we can see the same thing looking up at this one here and that one over there. So when we look at these, when it's in the open position, you can see it's like this. So that means it's wide open, air can flow freely. When it's in the closed position, then the damper is up and down like this. So it's blocking airflow from this one. If you ever see a situation where this one is fully open and this one is also fully open, or say half open or something like that, that means that something is not working properly, because these are supposed to only feed one rink at a time. So if you see something where they aren't with one closed and the other one open, let somebody know. So when you come over here to do your reading, we look at what is the temperature, what is the humidity, and we write those down on this sheet. So if we look at Sunday, you can see here 50, 35, and then the dew point was 23.8. So down here right now we've got a dew point of 18.2. So 18.2 isn't really a reading that we normally see. Normally when we look at the dew point, we're kind of in the range in the 20s to low 30s. And really, we want to be kind of right around here, about 29. So, we're never going to have both rinks right on 29, because it switches back and forth from one rink to the other rink, depending on which one is more in need of it. And that's based on the set points that we set up and adjust from time to time. So that's why you're always going to see numbers, a little above and a little below, but you always kind of want them to be a little bit in that range. And the reason you're always going to see one rink be a little bit further out of range in one direction and the other rink a little bit further out of range in the other direction. So you can see this one is a little bit higher than 29, this one's a little bit lower than 29. That is because we always have the set points set up with a differential between the two of them, because if we set the set points at the exact same place, then the dehumidifier would be fighting to try and switch back and forth from one rink to the other all the time, because we would be trying to tell it to turn on both at the same time, basically. So, when we do the recording, we don't want to just write down this number, and this number. We want to think about why are these numbers where they are. So, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Is that a normal temperature for the rink to be at? On a day like today, yeah, that's a pretty normal number. If you look at what the trend is, you know, over the last few days, over the last week, over the last few weeks, you can see that number trending. Temperature, pretty stable, in the 50s, all the way across 50s. You know, it always, you know, it varies up and down a little bit, 50s. Today, must have been a warmer day out, 40s. So, what about the temperature, or the relative humidity? Right now it's at 10%. Let's take a look at, what was it on Sunday? Sunday, 35, 34, 31, 26, 30, you know? So that's a more typical amount. You look at today it was 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. That's unusual. 10 is pretty low compared to what you'd see on most days. So that alone should give you some kind of indication that something is wrong. Especially seeing the exact same number all the way across. Sometimes you'll see that with the temperature, occasionally you'll see it with the humidity, but normally you see a little bit more variation, you know, going up and down a few points in either direction. So now if we look at the dew point, so the dew point today, 10.8, 12.1, 12.1, 8.4. So that right there, where we've got two exact same to the decimal point, is unusual. And that's something you want to pay attention to. Anytime you see the numbers not moving, it's a good indication that there's a problem, because you generally see some fluctuation. And then another indication is the fact that both dampers were open. So in this system, when both dampers are wide open, most of the airflow goes into Alex Kalita Arena, because the way that the ductwork is plumbed, you can see that it's a much more straight direction going on to Alex Kalita than it is to Thelma Crow. So Thelma Crow will only get proper airflow if these two dampers are fully closed. When these are fully closed, they block up the airflow onto Alex Kalita, and the air gets forced over to Thelma Crow. These are full open, probably 80 to 90% of the air is flowing on to Alex Kalita, and only about 10 or 20% is flowing to Thelma Crow. And that's what would have been happening today, is the dampers were both wide open on both rinks, as you can see from the checks. Wide open both rinks, and that's why, even though the stat wasn't calling for it, the dehumidifier ran on Alex Kalita all day, and that's why you have the relative humidity and the dew point so low, because it dried out the rink more than it should have. So anytime that you see something like that happening, where the number here or here is not within the normal range, you want to ask yourself why. Is there something different going on? Are there a whole lot of floods being done? Is there something that would cause it? Is the dehumidifier working properly? So say this on here is reading something funny like 00 or 5 or some number that's really not typical for what we see in a normal day. You can reference this chart. So this chart's got the dry bulb temperature across the bottom, the relative humidity that is going on these lines that curve this direction. And then it's got the humidity grade across the side. So you've got your 29.9, and that's kind of what we're shooting for. And if you look at where everything intersects, you can find, based on what the temperature is, what the humidity is, what the dew point should be reading. So say you came out and this was saying 0. Well, anytime it's saying 0, it's likely messed up. Anytime it's reading a really low number, either the controller is messed up or something has happened like we had happen today, where the dampers are stuck open and it drove the humidity and the dew point way down. So since a lot of people find this chart a little bit difficult to read, there's a little bit of a cheat sheet up in this corner where it shows you some different combinations of temperature and relative humidity that get us in that 29.9 range. And just remember that we want to be in that ballpark. We're never going to be dead on 29.9 on both rinks. But this little chart we created to make it a little bit easier to find for the dew point based on the relative humidity and the temperature. So if we look at today's readings, let's see, this morning, temperature of 49, let's call that 50, and humidity of 10. We look down the temperature side, 50. Follow that across until we get to 10 on the humidity side, and we get an empty box. So what does that mean? That means something is wrong, because if you look, when you've got 10% humidity, these are your dew points relative to temperature going down this side. So say the dew point would have been at 20 and the temperature was at 80, you would have a dew point of 32. But in this case, sorry, if it was at 10 and 80, you'd have 32. In this case, we're at 10 and 50, and it doesn't even show up on the chart. So that's a pretty good indication that we're not at 29.9. Because if you look for, say, a 30, you know, you can find stuff in the 30 range and see what humidity and temperature it corresponds to. Rather than looking at the charts, really the easiest thing to do is really pay attention when you're doing your checks to look at the other numbers and compare and think about it and decide if those numbers make sense based on what's going on. Do this with all your checks, not just this check. Any check that you do, whether it's the plant room, plant room, you look at the pressures. Do those pressures make sense for what's going on with the compressors? In this case, do these temperatures and these humidities make sense for what's going on? Does the building feel like it's at 50 degrees when it says that it's at 50 degrees? So really pay attention to these numbers, look for patterns in the numbers, and anytime you see something that doesn't make sense with what you normally see, like we did here today, where it's 10 for the relative humidity and kind of in that 10 ballpark for the dew point, that's not normal. Ask yourself what's going on, and then make sure that you let somebody know. Talk to Mike or Joe or myself and let them know that you think there is something wrong with that piece of equipment, whether it's the dehumidifier or something else in the building. Always let someone know when you see something that looks unusual to you. All right, thanks a lot, guys.